Love them like your father loves. Something hard to do. Love your enemies. In Matthew 5:43, you have heard that it has been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you. Pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he makes his sun to rise on evil and on the good, sends rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love them which love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans the same? And if you salute your brethren only, what do you more than others? Do not even the publicans so? Be you therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. There's a little poem or story. There once were two cats from Kilkenny. Each thought there was one cat too many. They fought and they spit and they clawed and they bit, till instead of two cats, there weren't any. Hatred is an interesting topic. As believers, we are taught that hatred is not a good thing. We are not to hate. But in the days of Yeshua, one of the common sayings of the day was, hate those who hate you. In fact, they would point to what seemed to be a biblical foundation to that topic in Psalms 139, verse 21. Do not I hate them, O Yahweh, that hate thee? And am not I grieved with those that rise up against thee? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them my enemies. In addition, there seems to be some logical reason to hate others. In an April 2010 edition of Reader's Digest, a man named Bob Brody wrote this: I've discovered that nothing feels quite as satisfying as a grudge well nursed. I had a boss who took a dislike to me from my first day on the job. Even though she hired me, there were no complaints about my performance, but I later learned she lied to coworkers about me. Without explanation, she laid me off after only 10 weeks, just before Thanksgiving. I had a family to support. Was I to forgive her? Should I now? Give me one good reason. My grudge against her balanced out that injustice, somehow righted the universe. It has kept me warm on many a cold night. A long-standing grudge suggests that we hold certain standards, that we respect ourselves enough to reject bad behavior. Failure to forgive can be just as righteous, just as honorable as forgiveness itself. So there are people who feel justified in hating their enemies, in refusing to forgive, because it shows they have standards. It shows they respect themselves. It shows that they refuse to accept bad behavior. They believe that hating the enemy, makes them righteous and honorable, even like Elohim. And that was the mindset of the religious community in the days of Yeshua. Love your neighbors, hate your enemies, they taught. And you'll be like Elohim. Then along comes Yeshua and he says, wait a minute. That's not true. Yeshua said in Matthew 5:44, but I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, pray for them that which despitefully use you and persecute you. But that doesn't make any sense. Why would I want to love my enemies? They're my enemies for a reason. They've hurt me. They lied about me. They betrayed me. If I could love them, they wouldn't be my enemies now, would they? But Yeshua says, love your enemies. Now, why would I want to do that? Well, someone listed 3 reasons why we should love our enemies. It's cheaper than getting a lawyer. It decreases the likelihood that you'll end up being a guest on the Jerry Springer Show. But, most importantly, Yeshua said so. Yeshua said I should love my enemies. It doesn't have to make sense. All I have to know is that this is what he wants. You see, I need to understand that Yahweh's ways and Yahweh's thoughts aren't like mine. In Isaiah 55 verse 8, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, says Yahweh. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Yahweh doesn't think like we think, and his ways aren't like our ways. That is especially true when it comes to loving my enemies. Loving our enemies has always been Yahweh's will for us. Even back in the Old Testament, Yahweh taught that in Exodus 23, verse 4, if you meet your enemy's ox or his ass going astray, thou shalt surely bring it back to him again. If you see the ass of him that hates you lying under his burden, and would forbear to help him, thou shalt surely help with him. In Proverbs 25:21, if thy enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat. If he's thirsty, give him water to drink. For thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head, and Yahweh shall reward thee. And this command from Proverbs was repeated in Romans 12, verse 20, telling us believers that Yahweh had not changed his mind. Therefore, if thy enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Yahweh has always wanted his people to love their enemies. But why? Well, there's 3 reasons I can think of. And the first reason is this. I should love my enemies because it's in my own best interest to do so. In Matthew 5:46. For if you love them which love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans the same? In Luke 6:35, Yeshua preaches essentially the same sermon, but there he says, but love you your enemies. Do good and lend, hoping for nothing again. And your reward shall be great, and you shall be the children of the highest. For he is kind unto the unthankful and to the evil. There's a reward for doing this. Yahweh will reward me for loving my enemies. There is a reward. For Yahweh knows how difficult this can be to do this. So he specifically promises he would reward us for making the effort. And what is the reward? According to one resource, people who do not forgive the wrongs committed against them tend to have higher rates of divorce, experience more stress, have more depression, and suffer from more cardiovascular disease, strokes, and heart attacks. By contrast, as a group, people who forgive tend to suffer less from depression, have more friends and family to support them. In fact, forgiven people are better at making friends than those who carry grudges. Now, the last makes sense because people who don't forgive, people who hold grudges and dwell on the wrongs done to them, don't make very pleasant companions. They're extremely unhappy people to be around. Forgiveness is good for you. You will be rewarded physically for loving your enemies. By contrast, according to one observer, hating your enemies is just a prolonged form of suicide. But wait, there's more to this reward than just physical benefits. In 2 Chronicles 16 verse 9 tells us that the eyes of Yahweh range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. In 2 Chronicles 16 verse 9, for the eyes of Yahweh run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong in the behalf of them whose heart is perfect towards him. Herein thou hast done foolishly, therefore from henceforth thou shalt have wars. In other words, Yahweh is looking to reward you when you obey him in things like this. Yahweh is looking to strengthen you, to bless you, to actively work in your life to do good things for you, all because he knows how hard it is for us to do. So Yeshua teaches me that I should love my enemies because it's in my best interest. Yahweh will reward me if I'm faithful to him in this. And secondly, Yeshua teaches me that if I love my enemies, I show that I am not like the pagans. In Matthew 5:47, and if you salute your brethren only, what do you more than others? Do not even the publicans so? Now let's think about this for a minute. The Bible teaches us that once we become believers, we belong to Yeshua. So if we belong to Yeshua, who does everyone else belong to? Satan. Now here's the deal. Before I became a believer, I used to belong to Satan. I used to be a soldier for him. I learned to live my life the way Satan would live. When I got mad as Satan would. When I fought fights, I tended to fight my fights like Satan fights. And Satan is a hater of his enemy. He hates Yahweh. He hates us because we are made in Yahweh's image. And how does Satan fight? He's the accuser of brethren. He's the destroyer of everything Yahweh holds precious. Satan hates, and he hates, and he hates. And he teaches his followers to hate. And when we hate our enemies, we live like we belong to him. We end up living as pagans live. Yeshua says, don't be like that. I call you to be a people of love, not of hate. In 1 John 4:20, if a man says, I love Elohim and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he that loves not his brother who he sees, how can he love Elohim who he has not seen? In Galatians 5:19 and 20, tell us that if we are going to live like real believers, we need to understand the acts of the sinful natures are obvious. Galatians 5:19, now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, and heresies. As believers, we cannot allow ourselves the luxury of living in the pagan way. To allow myself the luxury of hating my enemies is to go back to my pagan roots. It's to go back to living the kind of life I lived before I came to Messiah. But we were called to live differently. We were called to live differently than the world does. We were called to be a light in a dark world, a city on a hilltop that draws people out of their darkness. So Yeshua says, don't do that. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Matthew 5:44. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. And that leads us to the third reason we should love our enemies. We should love our enemies because that proves we are the children of the Most High Elohim. Matthew 5:45, Yeshua says we should love our enemies so that you may be the sons of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and the good. He sends rain on just and the unjust. You see, Yahweh loves his enemies. You didn't know? Did you know that? That Yahweh had enemies? Romans 5 verse 10. For if when we were enemies, we were reconciled to Yahweh by the death of his Son, much more, being reconciled, we shall be saved by his life. Before you and I became believers, we were Yahweh's enemies. In fact, Ephesians 2 verse 3 tells us that at that time we were objects of wrath. Ephesians 2:3, among whom also we all had our conversation in time past in the lust of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath, even as others. So we were Yahweh's enemies. We were objects of wrath. If Yahweh had not loved us, we would have all gone to the grave unsaved. But Yahweh so loved us that he gave his only begotten Son to die for us, even when we were his enemies. In fact, Yahweh cared so much for us that he never withheld even the most basic of blessings to us. Yeshua said, Yahweh causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain in the righteous and the unrighteous. Matthew 5:45. That you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he makes his sun to shine on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. Now, if it was me, if I was Elohim, only the good and righteous would see sunshine and rain. The other guys would stand out in the cold desert for all I cared, and they would whistle away at all the sun and the rain and all they wanted, but they wouldn't get any. But Yahweh is not like that, because 2 Peter tells us that he is patient with us, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. In 2 Peter 3 verse 9. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness, but is long-suffering to usward, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. You see, people who want to hate their enemies want to play Elohim. They want to be celestial enforcers, powerful destroyers that can squash the evil that is their enemy with a mighty hand. They feel almost Elohim-like as they lay awake at night and consider the terrible ways which they could destroy those they hate. If only they had that power. They would want the power of Yahweh. But that isn't what Yahweh is like. Yahweh wants everyone to be saved. And if we're going to be like Yahweh, we need to realize that playing Elohim means that we need to forgive our enemies like Yahweh forgave us. In Ephesians 4:32, and be you kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as Yahweh, for Messiah's sake, has forgiven you. A few years back, there was a powerful story of an African boy named Demir. He was a slave who had angered his Muslim master. So his owner took him out into the wilderness, nailed his feet and knees to a board, and left him there to die. Fortunately, someone found him and nursed him back to health. Demir later told the Voice of the Martyrs that he forgave the person who did this to him. Why? Because Jesus was nailed and forgave him. The young man knew what it was like to be like his father. The young man forgave as Yahweh had forgiven him when Messiah was nailed to the stake. But if we don't learn to forgive our enemies, we become like our enemies. And we end up hurting our Yeshua, the Yeshua who died for us when we were his enemies. There's also a story of a Sunday school class, the teacher known for his elaborate object lessons, and that Sunday was no different. And on the wall was a big target, and on the nearby table were many darts. The teacher told his students to draw a picture of someone that they disliked or someone they had made them angry. And he allowed them to throw darts at the person's picture. And one of the girls drew a picture of another girl who had stolen her boyfriend. Someone drew a picture of his little brother. One even drew a picture of the teacher. The class lined up and began throwing darts, and everybody got into the fun. Some of the students threw their darts with such force that the targets were ripping apart. When everyone had their turn, the teacher began removing the pictures from the target, and then he took down the target. The whole room gasped as they saw that under the target was a picture of Yeshua. The teacher spoke with these simple words to close the class. Inasmuch as you have done it unto the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. In Matthew 25, verse 40, and the king shall answer and say unto them, truly I say unto you, inasmuch as you have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. Now here's the deal. Loving your enemy can be tough. Even when your enemy is being fairly nice to you, it can still feel awkward. But many times, it can be a painful experience, filled with embarrassing feelings that can make the effort seem nearly impossible. Let me explain that forgiving your enemy is hard to do. I'm not telling you something you don't know. Enemies are enemies because they've hurt us, sometimes in terrible and unspeakable ways. Yahweh knows that, and he knows how deeply our pain can get. But he believes in you, and he calls you and I to go beyond what mere mortals could do. And he's proud of us when we risk ourselves to love as he loved. Years ago, a woman named Corrie ten Boom, she wrote a book called The Hiding Place, which describes the terrible things she and her sister, Betsy, endured as prisoners in the Nazi concentration camps. The conditions were bad enough, but the guards were men and they humiliated the woman in unspeakable ways. And after the war, Corrie struggled with her hatred of the Nazis, and she was especially frustrated because she knew that Yeshua said about forgiving enemies. But she prayed and prayed until she finally came to understand why she should do that, and she became a popular speaker throughout Europe. And as she helped thousands of people overcome the bitterness of war, one day she came face to face with one of her Nazi tormentors. She wrote, it was a church service in Munich, and I saw him, the former SS man who had stood guard at the shower room door in the processing center at Ravensbrück. He was the first of our actual jailers that I had seen since that time. Suddenly it was all there, the room full of mocking men, the heaps of clothing, Betsy's pain-blanched face. He came up to me at the church was emptying, beaming and bowing. How grateful I am for your message, Fraulein, he said. To think that, as you say, he has washed my sins away. His hand was thrust out to shake mine, and I, who had preached so often to the people in Bloemendaal the need to forgive, kept my hand at my side. Even as the angry, vengeful thoughts boiled through me, I saw the sin of them. Yeshua Messiah had died for this man. Was I going to ask for more? She prayed, Lord, forgive me and help me to forgive him. I tried to smile. I struggled to raise my hand. I could not. I felt nothing, not the slightest spark of warmth or charity. And so again I breathed a silent prayer. I cannot forgive him. Give me your forgiveness. She managed to lift her hand and take his, she wrote. And as I took his hand, the most incredible thing happened. From my shoulder along my arm and through my hand, a current seemed to pass from me to him, while into my heart sprang a love for this stranger that almost overwhelmed me. And so I discovered that it is not on our forgiveness any more than on our goodness that the world healing hinges, but on him. When he tells us to love our enemies, he gives, along with the command, the love itself. This is Yahweh's promise to us. If we seek to honor him in loving our enemies, he will supply what is needed. It will still be difficult, but Yahweh will show you how to make your way through the pain and struggle of your effort, to give you the power to do what needs to be done, to heal that which is hurt and fix that which is broken. But in order for you to have this power to love your enemies, you must receive Yahweh's love first. You must belong to him to be able to obey him. Yahweh bless.